Welcome to Schmagents Schmublishers. So we're going to talk about some of the ways to tell if you're encountering shady agents, agencies, and publishers. I'm Laura, I'll be your moderator this morning, and I'd like to ask each of our panelists to introduce themselves and tell us who you are and what you represent.
Hi, my name is Thao from the Sandra Dijkstra agency, but you guys may already know that because today's Sunday and we've all been here several times. Just to remind you, I am a lure agent who represents young adults, middle grade, some select picture books by author illustrators, some select romance, and adult and fantasy.
For those of you who don't know, my name is Watterson. I'm also at the Sandra Dijkstra Literary Agency. I represent primarily romance. I do YA, women's fiction, and select picture books as well.
Hello, as a lot of you already this weekend. I'm Joanna, Volpe, work at Lily Meade and I represent everything from picture books to adults, fiction, and nonfiction, but the stuff that I represent tends to skew a little bit darker in theme usually.
Well, we'll start out first talking about... sorry. Better? Okay. So we'll start out talking about agents, and we'll then move on to Schmublishers a little bit later on. So could you guys define, well, to start out, can you sort of define what it is we're going to be talking about? What is a Schmagent or a Schmublisher?
So a Schmagent is basically, in all honesty, anyone can put up a website and call themselves an agent. There's no license to become one. There's no specific college degree to become one. You can kind of just call yourself an agent and start accepting clients, and that's it. What's the difference between a reputable agent and a Schmagent is that reputable agents know what they're doing. They know the industry, they know the business. They're actually the professional. They have professional, either mentoring or some sort of training, so that they know the business and can do it properly. Whereas an agent or Schmagent is just someone who kind of calls themselves that and sort of preys on, writers who are eager to get their work out.
Yeah, there's no licensing for literary agents. There's no committee that's following us. The AAR, the Association of Authors Representatives, is an ethics committee that exists. And if you are a member of the AAR, you are a reputable agent. However, if you're not a member, it doesn't mean that you're not a reputable agent. So that doesn't really help you guys, right? It's one of the few jobs that I know that still exists in white collar work that's truly an apprenticeship type position. You work under another agent for a certain amount of time and learn and absorb and are trained. And then at one point they say, go forth, sign on your first client. And it's like the best thing in the world when that happens. It's also super scary, yes. But you actually feel like you have that safety net of the training you've received. But because there's no one really governing this, like Thao said, anyone can hang up a shingle and say, I'm an agent. When I was querying, when I wanted to be a writer, I had a run with two different Schmagents. I was very excited. It was right around a time when I was still mostly mailing my physical queries. Some places were starting to be we'll look at email queries, but most agencies weren't even looking at email queries yet, actually, when I was querying. So, I was doing as much research as I can online and buying books of resources of agencies and trying to get what I could. But, when I went out there, the two offers of representation I got, and I was so excited, I remember telling my mom about it and whatever it be, were from agencies who, once I did a little more research, didn't actually have any sales to any major publishers, or they had one sale to a major publisher, right? And that's what they would use as their pillars. So I'd be but they worked on, they worked with this author who I've heard of. I was a bookseller at the time, so I'd heard a lot of authors and a big reader. So I was like, I know this book, and they worked on it. But then you dig a little deeper and you find out they actually didn't sell it. It was maybe someone that they used to work with sold it, so they were in directly affiliated with it, you know, whatever it be. There's a lot of like really tricksy marketing that goes on, I think, with those guys. But any reputable agent should have like a list of sales that they've made. And if they're a newer agent, it should be an agency who has a list of sales that the agency has made. And like, you might be their first sale, and that's fine. Everyone has a first sale. But as long as you know that somewhere along the line that they're affiliated with someone who does this professionally.
I would also say that we run into a lot of Schmagents who charge reading fees. If you are charged up front for anything, that is not a real agent. We do not make money unless you make money. And also, don't pay somebody to submit for you. It's completely free to submit to us. Like, I don't know why you would want to pay somebody to, you know, sit in our slush pile. That's not something that I would go for.
Yeah, I literally won't look at a query that comes from a third party submission service. So I was like, why do I want someone to come between me and the author I'm signing? What? That's crazy.
Yeah.
So.
This is different from like a referral. Like if you have someone that like maybe one of our clients is your friend or something, and they tell us like, oh, you should definitely look out for a query for so and so. That's different. But you know, for that, like I think there's some. I've seen some other writers tell me that there's like querying, like I guess like querying companies that like will write your query for you or will submit it for you for a fee. Yeah, those things are probably not a good thing to get into.
Do you want to comment on Schmublishers too, or was this just Schmagents right now?
Actually, we can kind of go back and forth. Yeah, if you want to talk about publishers, that's fine.
Same thing with Schmublishers. These are, you know, anyone can open up a company and say I'm a publisher. And actually with the boom of independent publishing, that's exactly what self-published authors have had to do. They have to create their own publishing company to publish their work. So I'm not going to actually talk about the independent publishers who do that because that's fine. You know, if you're going to self-publish and you're like, I need to create my own publisher to exist so that I can publish my own work, totally fine. Like, you're not going to take advantage of yourself. So, good. I'm talking about the publishers that just start and say, I'm just going to publish work with no experience at any other publishing house. And it doesn't have to be a big publishing house. Like, there are some really great small presses that have been around for decades. You know, it's like they should, just like an agent, they should have experience in the industry. You know, so publishing is a multifaceted business. So you can't just say, I'm just going to put this stuff out. If we have signed authors who have worked with independent presses, and I shouldn't say it, with Schmublishers, who we first think they're just an independent press, and then find out they're a Schmublisher. And the reason we find out is we say, great, so glad to be working with you. I should probably take a look at the contract you signed to see like what the deal is for your next book. And then I look at the contract and I'm like, oh, so you paid to print your own book. You paid for your own cover. You're only getting 10% of net royalties on everything. What? Like, you know, like it's actually costing you money to publish and they're making everything. Like, to me, there are just certain terms that I know to look for that aren't correct. But I will tell you one thing, if you are paying to actually physically publish your book in any way, shape, or form, or even digitally publish the book, like, that is a red flag if they ask you to put up any money. Now, marketing and publicity money is different, because even traditional publishers, unfortunately, obviously, put up a lot on that side, but that is also discretionary. But I'm talking about, like, in order to publish a book, you need a cover, and if they're like, great, how much are you going to put towards it? Like, run the other way, truly.
I would say the only instance where you should be paying for your cover is if you are self-publishing. That is, I mean, aside from marketing, because yes, you are your best asset in marketing your own book, your own work. Outside of that, you shouldn't be paying anything to publish your book.
I think also a very big red flag is when you're looking at the contract, you should absolutely read your contract and ask questions if you don't understand what it means. When you're dealing with any small press or even a big font, you should be asking questions about your contract, in my opinion, as see who it's copyrighted to, and making sure that they will copyright in your name and not theirs. And that it's your book. When when you get a book deal, you're not selling your book, you're selling your book rights, as some of us have mentioned before.
Yeah, and guys, you need to get your work copyrighted within the first 90 days of publication. copyright law changed in 1976, so just by you actually being the one to write your work and having files on your computer and at home, you actually have a certain amount of protection under copyright law. So don't worry, you have the base amount of protection just by being the one who wrote your work and keeping organized files. However, if you don't get your work copyrighted registered with the Copyright Office, which your publisher should do for you, and it should be guaranteed in your contracts, that they will handle this for you within 90 days of publication, then you actually are vulnerable to other things around the world. Like I think Brazil, if there isn't a copyright notice in your book, they can just publish without even going to you. They can sell it and buy it. Like there's different laws around the world. Australia is another one. I think it needs to be copyrighted within 90 days in terms for distribution purposes. I mean, I don't know all the ins and outs. We work with an IP attorney to know that stuff, but I do know that there is actually a domino effect if your work is not registered and copyrighted within 90 days from the Copyright Office of publication.
Are there any other particular red flags that authors should be looking for, either when talking to agents or encountering publishers?
I think, as exciting as it is to get that call, just also trust your gut instincts. It will tell you a lot. Like when you're talking to someone on the phone and they feel a little like they're not answering questions directly, they're weirdly deflecting. Like if you ask them, so how many other clients do you have? And most agents, or at least I feel like many that I know, are actually willing to share the client lists with you. So if an agent's saying oh yeah, I have only so, and they don't want to disclose very much information about themselves, that might be a possible red flag.
I would say with that too, there should be a certain amount of transparency between an agent and their client. You should know what's going on in the process of, your whole, if you're going on submission, you should know what is happening with that agent, and they should be willing to give you updates and share information with you. And I've heard a lot of people say that doesn't happen with their agents around this con, and that's quite disturbing to hear. Sorry, my voice is gone. Because if you don't know what they're doing for you, then how do you know that they're doing anything for you? There should be that line of communication open. So that's a major red flag if you hear that they're not responsive. And yeah, I get that we're busy, but also at the same time, if my client emails me, I email them back as soon as I possibly can. I'm not going to leave them hanging.
Yeah, I think if they're just not willing to answer questions, that's a worry. Before you sign with a publisher, sign a contract with a publisher, or you sign with an agent, you should have a series of questions for them. If you guys want to know what those questions are, you should always ask, do you have any notes for my work? This actually applies to both. Some smaller presses don't do a ton of editing, so you should ask, do you have any notes for my work? How can I expect to receive those, and on roughly what timeline? You should ask about who their other clients are, whether they're books that they've worked on. You should ask for agents specifically, what is their agent style, in terms of communication, in terms of editorial process, in terms of submission process, because every agent has a little bit of a different style and all of those things. You should actually ask for a certain amount of time to review the contract and say, I'm going to need at least a week to review this. An agent will have you sign an agency agreement as well, so you're going to be receiving an agreement one way or the other. Those are some of the basics I feel like you definitely need to ask. I will tell you guys, if you don't need an agent to sign a publishing contract, but you definitely need an attorney at the very least. So an agent or an attorney, but if you can't get an agent, you can hire an attorney and make sure that they specifically have experience in book publishing. My husband was a corporate attorney, so this is not knocking attorneys, but they're just like doctors, right? Would you have a podiatrist do heart surgery on you? Nah, stick with the feet, dude. So it's that's the same thing with law. They need to have a certain amount of expertise. And also, to clarify, just because someone is an entertainment attorney does not mean that they Entertainment, plays, film, music, art, totally different beasts. So make sure that they have experience with publishing. For an agency agreement, there's a fantastic organization called the Authors Guild, and they offer free legal services. Now, there are certain amount that you have to join. I think they're fairly reasonable, like maybe $100 a year, so it's not going to like break your bank, especially if you're getting legal services out of it. It's certainly a good deal. But if they're once you join, they will look at agency agreements if you're offered by a reputable agency. They will look at an agency agreement, review it for you, and send questions to the agency or give them to you to ask the agent about their agreements. But there's so many resources online now. You could probably just Google agency agreement forms, literary agent terms, and for publishing, the same thing goes. There's actually a little bit of a wider variety of terms for publishers and agents. Like agency standard is 50% domestic commission. That's the standard across any reputable literary agency. And then you'll have variances in terms of foreign and film because they will work with co-agents. So I do know reputable agencies can, for foreign rights and film rights, can be anywhere from 15 to 30%, depending on how many levels of co-agents they work with. But those are like standard, whereas publishers, they feel the board. They can offer advance or no advance. They can offer 50% of net on ebook, especially a lot of smaller presses that have no advance contracts. Or they can offer 25% of net, which is for ebooks, which is the basic standard for traditional publishing houses. It just, that is a little bit more over the board, and that's why you actually probably need an attorney to look at that for you.
And for those of you who are looking to, work with a small press because you want to see your books in bookstore, ask them about their distribution. Like, if that's your intent that you want to see your books in Barnes and Nobles, make sure that they can get into Barnes and Nobles because not all small presses can. They have different, different ways of doing that. So don't be afraid to ask that. And a thing that I always try to tell authors to look out for in contracts is the royalty statements too. Know when you're going to get your royalty statements from these publishers. Know that if what happens if you find a mistake, if you can audit them, or if you can is there language for you to like go back and tell them like, hey, I just noticed that this was calculated wrong, or I noticed there was a mistake. Can we look into this and make sure that you are protected in that way because that is your money.
What sorts of resources are available to writers to help them check out agent reputations, more histories, and try to avoid querying a shady agent in the first place?
There's a lot of websites online. I think Absolute Right is one of them. And then there's Query Tracker, Query Stats. There's a bunch where you can actually see message boards of timelines of agents' responses. I think Absolute Right is the one that has a Schmagents flag on it, where people have written a certain amount of messages to warn against querying that agent. So if you look online, there's a lot of different tools that you can use there.
One that kind of costs money, but I think is kind of very valuable is Publishers Marketplace. I can't remember what the fee is for authors to access it, but it basically shows all the current deals that, not all, but a majority of current deals that agents and small publishers make. And so if you have an agent that you are interested in, you can type in their name and see the list of like recent deals they've made, and you can kind of see like, oh, this is like, it's helpful because it kind of shows like, oh, these are the type of books that they've been excited about and have sold recently, and also who they've sold it to.
I'm gonna admit here, guys, I have not updated my PMD.
That's what I was like.
I recently signed somebody and he was asking me questions, but I was like, these are really weird questions that he's asking me. Like he was saying things like, yeah, but have you sold anything lately? And I was like, well, yeah, for sure. And I just started like talking about on the phone, and he was like, all right, have you done any like bigger deals, like maybe deals like above $10,000? I'm like, yeah. And I was like, why is he asking this? And then someone said in my office was like, let me check out my PM page, and it hadn't been updated in like a year or two. And I was like, oh my God, he went there and was like, does this person sell something? So, I mean, there are other places you can look, right? It's PM is one place, and I honestly think that's just actually me. I actually talked to my assistants about that, and I was like, guys, get on this. Because it's me just owning my agency and like updating my PM page just being like a lower priority, right, for me. But certainly there are things announced elsewhere. Publishers Weekly also announces
Yes.
deals. And that's usually the publisher handle, so they do get out there. Let's see what else.
And I think that's free to access. If you just go to Publishers Weekly, they usually have like a rights rights or deals of the week.
Yeah.
And just look at that and like read through it. I think it's important to be like updated on like what current deals are being made, and you can see like, oh, I've been seeing this agent selling a lot of stuff that I personally like feel my story is close to. You know, she seems to have similar tastes as me, things like that.
Yeah, you can go to Publishers Weekly and actually search an agent's name, and it'll pick up not only every deal that they sold that's been announced in PW, but also the articles that they have you mentioned in, so it'll give you more information about them. And then there are a lot of really fantastic organizations that have resources online, like there's SCBWI, which is the Society of Children's Book Writers and Illustrators. So if you write for children at all, that includes picture book to YA, it's a young adult. There is SIFWA, which is the Science Fiction Fantasy Writers Association. There is HWA, which is the Horror Writers Association. There's RWA, which is the Romance Writers Association. There's the Mystery Writers of America. And all of these things, like there is a fee to join, and there also is a certain level of, I think you have to have a certain level of either publications. They're all a little bit different, right, because they're different associations, but you either have to have publications or be affiliated with certain things to join. But before you can even join, there's a lot of free stuff online for even non-members. So, you know, depending on what you write, guys, like, look into that. And a lot of those places also have local chapters in every state across the country. So you might actually even find like a local group that is like, if you write for like a local HWA group where you're like, yay, like-minded peeps. It's great.
Now, are there ways to distinguish between, you know, an agent who's just starting out, maybe doesn't have a long deal history, and somebody who is, you know, shady, not reputable, and going to be bad news for the writer?
So every agent has been new at some point. So I would say, like again, we talked about how, you know, being a literary agent is sort of still in an apprenticeship to a certain extent. I would look at like if they're with a big agency, if they're brand new, or you know how long they've been in. Maybe they were in publishing in another capacity before becoming an agent. Maybe they were like a head with like a marketing director who decided to jump into agenting. Maybe they were an editor at one of the big five before they decided to jump to agenting. Things like, you know, just history and their background like that will kind of give you a good idea of how much they know about the business. If they're like totally brand new, they just threw up a website and said that like, oh, I'm currently agenting now. But if you see in their bio, they mention nothing about like any previous experience or very little experience, then maybe that might be slightly like, questionable.
I would say along with that, how Thao is saying that, you know, editors or marketing people might transition into agenting, they still need to have some learning experiences from a more established agent. So if you notice they are not like really close to any other agents, that might be a red flag too.
Yeah, I think it depends on how much experience. If someone's like an editor for like 30 years and switching, it's like, I still think they need to learn, right? That's like me switching to marketing after 30 years. Like there's some stuff I need to learn, right? But chances are if they've been an editor for 30 years, then they have dealt with enough agents, have enough agent friends, like, you know, where they can do that. So it really is a matter of just doing your research online. You know, I don't know, there's just so many resources now that like weren't there. I used to go to the library. I didn't even have internet when I was growing either because I was super broke, and I was like going to the library and like pulling out the old like writers digest, like guide to agenting, highlighting like things on my list.
Still printed.
They do still print it, yes, no, so it's still available, but it's also now available online, so it's great.
So what are some qualities of a good agent and things that a writer should look for?
It's different for everybody. If you guys were at our past panels, we talked about the kind of writers that we're looking for in terms of working for us. So what might be a good agent for you is not necessarily a good agent for someone else. So there's that. I mean, you have to make sure that you and your agent share the same goals and vision for your work, period, at the end. So whatever that is, they should be shared. And then other than that, I just think open and transparent communication. It's that simple. Everything else is a variable.
I would say the number one thing that I hear from writers who have left their previous agent was they were not responsive or communicative. So that is something that you definitely want to ask any prospective agent. What is your response timeline? Like, how can I reach you? When can I reach you? Do you have specific like office hours where I can call you? It's very much your preference, but I have authors who they don't want to talk to me unless they have something for me, and then I have authors who are like, can I check in with you every week? So it really depends.
It really depends on what you're looking for too. For instance, like if you need a more editorial hands-on agent, you probably don't want to go with the agent who's, more business-minded and thinking about like, marketing strategy and things like that. So it kind of depends on your needs. So you want to find a good fit. And then to follow up about, sorry, I was thinking about like responsiveness, like a lot of agents do have a lot going on. So if it's taking them a week to respond, but as long as they respond, that's okay. If it's going on months and months and you have a serious question and they're not responding back to you, that's when it's like, what's going on here? I do think that there is some delay between some responses. Sometimes it's because they don't know the answer yet and they're trying to figure it out or whatever. So don't think like if they don't answer you within 24 hours that they're a bad agent. But if you feel like you're constantly checking, like trying to touch base with them and they're refusing to even acknowledge your email, that's a red flag.
And similarly, what would you say are the qualities of a good publisher that I should look for?
Same, right? I mean, transparent communication. If a publisher, I love it, even if it's not great news, when a publisher says to me, like an editor gets on the phone and they're like, look, this book, but I want to help, like, what can we do here? It's like not great news, but I'm like, thank you. Okay, now I know where we're starting. So it's the communication is like, is the key there.
Just honesty, and like you can feel that you can trust them, and that there's nothing like if it seems like they're trying to like just assuage you that nothing's wrong, but like you still feel like nothing's happening or something, that you should be talking to an agent about like I want to find out more about what's going on.
I would also think a publisher who is willing to listen to if you have any problems. And this is more primarily with small presses that you'll find, because small presses, they don't have as many authors on their list. They're more willing and most of the time more direct and open with communication. I've had it where, a deal wasn't going the way that the author had envisioned it, and we had like a come to Jesus on the phone with her editor, her marketing person, somebody else, and it's been, it was really, I think it showed her how much they were willing to do to make her happy in a situation.
So what should a writer do if he or she realizes that perhaps they have encountered a shady agent and need to get out of that situation?
Get out ASAP.
Right.
It really, it's like publishing an agency, like I always compare it to being like a marriage, because the deeper you get into the relationship, the harder it is to disentangle yourself. If you sell a book with that agent, they are literally attached to that book for the life of copyright. Like, why would you do, like, and if you already did, like, don't sell another one because you're too nervous to leave. Like, get out as soon as possible. And even if it's against the terms of your agreement, if you feel like, oh my gosh, my agreement says very clearly that I cannot get out before this time period, and consult with someone, maybe the Writers of the Authors Guild, maybe just find another attorney, specifically a publishing attorney if you can, but in the case of just getting out, just an attorney that has maybe some general contractual and transactional experience would be helpful, and say, look, I've gotten wind that this person is not reputable, I'm concerned about my work being in their hands, I need to get out of this agreement, it says that I can't before this time, like, what can I do to get out or to protect my work?
Yeah, and I think, going back to contracts with either agent or publisher, look at that termination contract so that you know exactly how you would get out of a partnership with either of them.
And what sorts of consequences could writers potentially be looking at or facing by working with a shady agent, other than just, obviously not getting the maximum money or distribution or anything for their book.
Well, with scammers, you're getting scammed, so if it's an agent asking for you to pay up front, then you've lost whatever money you've already paid them. I think that's like the clear one. But yes, like everything you said, if your book is kind of mishandled, then you kind of lost that chance for that book. It's very difficult to resell that book elsewhere after it's been kind of already published by a non-reputable publisher.
I mean, a lot of things. You can lose money. You can never have access to your royalty statements. I mean, the way agents work, right? They don't only sell their book for you, but everything flows through them. So all payments come from my agency. We take our commission out, and then we remit the rest to you. We handle foreign rights. We handle film rights. We handle, whatever, audio rights, all that stuff. So if you're unfortunately attached to an agent who has the right, the exclusive right to represent the work that they have with you, it's holding up all that stuff, which is why the sooner the better, just get out.
And similarly on the publisher side, if somebody ends up with a bad publisher, what sort of consequences are they looking at?
I mean, it's very much the same, and like what Thao was saying, I mean, unfortunately, that book is pretty much done after that. If you pull your contract, if you got an advance, you're forfeiting that advance. You will have to pay that back to the publisher, and your book is, unfortunately, it's got a very, very, very slim chance of ever seeing the light of day after that. Sorry for the doom and gloom session, guys.
No, I'm literally working on a situation right now with someone I signed who their first contract was with a Schmublisher, and she's so talented. I mean, it's like one of these things where I'm like, oh my gosh, this was her debut, and that's really hard. So now we're kind of going up against a lot of different things. It's not just do we try to fight to get this work back and resell it, which is very difficult, as we said, but also like, okay, let's say we give up that fight and our resources is telling your next book. They're gonna be like, great, how'd the first book do? Not great, because they did zero for it and they didn't put the book out, as they promised, and so it's just like it's a new set of hurdles for this author.
You're only a
Extremely talented.
you're only a debut once, so I always tell authors it's better to have no publishing deal than a bad one, honestly, for their first book. And same with an agent, it's better to have no agent than a bad agent.
Oh, yeah.
Is there any other specific advice that you would give to writers when they're looking for an agent or working with a publisher?
Research. Just research. It's your best weapon. And ask questions.
Yeah, it's the same. That's all you need to do.
Yeah, just like I think a lot of new writers are like afraid of doing the call that they're being the one interviewed, but it's a conversation. Like you should be able to ask, and a good agent expects you to be asking questions about them. They should be able to talk about themselves. Same thing with a good publisher. They should be able to answer your questions about a variety of things. And if you feel like they can't, then maybe do a little bit more digging as to why would they not answer that type of question.
Do we have any questions from the audience?
Related, going back to the contract with the literary agent, are there terms or language that say if the book isn't sold, agreement to come to a publisher within X number of days, months, years, the agreement is dissolved?
No, and the reason for that is because I don't sign someone for a book. I sign them because I'm like, I'm going to be with you for your author career. And so, Amy Lukovics, I love to tell this story because I signed her in 2009, and it took us 5 books to sell her first one. And now I just closed another contract for her to make her 4th book, which is great. But it was one of those things where it just took us a while to find her niche. She was writing seriously dark contemporary, incredible writer. And I was getting great responses from editors, but each time it was getting better. Like the first submission, like everyone just kind of rejected it and did a lot of notes. Second book, I actually got a lot of like, oh, I'm going to pass on this, but like, I would get a revision kind of thing. And the third one, it went to acquisitions and a number of houses didn't get bought. And by the 4th one, I was like, everyone's not buying this because they're saying your work is so dark, and you love horror. Like, why aren't you just writing horror? Like, you're writing contemporary that's so dark, it's scaring people. She was like, "You're right," and then she switched to horror and we sold it shortly after. So it was just kind of like it took a while to find there. But yeah, man, I hope that she wouldn't have just been like, "Well, you can sell my book, let's dissolve," because I was right there invested along with her and editing her work and like having her lunches and pitching her stuff. And so it was kind of like that was my favorite call to make, actually, guys. It was so great. She cried. It was awesome. But yeah, so it's not about a sale necessarily of a book. At least it's not tied to a book for me.
Not for me either.
Yeah, and I just want to say, like, again, like, we don't make money until we sell your book. So all of this time we're invested in you. We're invested in your future in a long-term career. So it's specifically for our agency contract, it's for what we would automatically renew. So it is basically the same. It's not really having a term. But like, if you're concerned about that, definitely, again, like I say, always read the termination clause for any contract.
Yeah, there is going to be a termination clause. So like for new leaves, I'll tell you guys right now, it's for 1 year. And then you're allowed, and it automatically renews after a year, but you're allowed to terminate within 30 days, as long as it's 30 days notice after that first year at any point. So I guess it's kind of the same, in that 1 year we might go out with nothing because you might still be editing your work the whole time, or we might go out with like 3 or 4 things. I mean, that's actually a little crazy, but like maybe 2 or 3 things if you do picture books or something, but like you just don't know. So.
And also don't get freaked out when you see the termination. It's not immediate. Most of the time it's not. There's usually at least like 30 days. And usually that's because we also need time to close out, especially if we're in the middle of submissions. That doesn't happen like instantly. Sometimes it takes months. So we do need some time to tie up loose ends.
Other questions?
I got into something shady with somebody, and it started out great. It was great, communication. I had ideas for the children's picture book I was doing, and then it kind of went downhill from there. So finally, the email I just said, I'm not interested anymore. Shady or not? And if you've been offered something, what is the best way to say no? Verbally, email, does the author need it in writing so that an agent or publisher can't come back and say something we never, don't have in writing, so we thought we had a deal, something like that?
I don't think you can just have a deal without signing a contract. Not for a publisher that level.
No, you can't.
I've never seen that before. So if it's with a publisher, then they can just say, like, we made you an offer, so we expected that you were supposed to just deliver. So that won't happen. From my experience, though, I always think an email is a good thing. And it doesn't have to be like anything like hostile. You can just say, like, no, thank you, I'm passing on this offer.
Yeah, I would always get it in writing.
Yeah.
I mean, the most protection you can have is if it's very clearly stated in writing what's being terminated and both parties sign. But sometimes you can't always get that to happen. So then you just go down like the row. Like if you can get an email and an acknowledgement to your email, that's all. Like as long as it's clear what's being terminated, that's also helpful. But if you also didn't sign anything with these folks, then you're probably okay sending an email and then just keeping that and actually stating in the email, since nothing was signed between us. It was only discussed verbally, that we may or may not work together. I'm actually just clarifying right now that we will not be working together. Period. In an email to that person, and even if they don't respond, you're sending it to their email address, and you're saying in the email that nothing's ever signed. So I think it's fine. But always having something in writing is key.
I was curious about the contests. I know there are groups like RWA who sometimes do contests, but it seems like some of them are kind of shady. I wasn't sure.
I don't think.
I mean, not with the organizations, but like when you get magazines, you're like, okay, what's okay to do and what's not.
Well, if it's sponsored by the organization, then it's usually not going to be shady. Because,
Okay.
most reputable organizations aren't going to align themselves with something that has a bad reputation.
I was thinking more like in the backs of the magazines, the writing magazines. Because I
Those
would
are
think with
paid ads,
RWA,
right?
it'd be fine.
In the back of
What?
magazines, those are paid ads, so
Yeah.
anyone can just
Right.
do that. If you're gonna join any contest, guys, like read the small print. Make sure that you're not assigning your rights over. And some really reputable organizations will run contests where you assign your rights over for a period of time. So So it's not a reputable or not reputable. You just have to make sure that you are aware if you're assigning the rights or not. You might be okay with it because you super duper want to win that contest and like the prize is worth it. But then you have to be aware that like you assigned the rights over. So just read the small print to those things.
And also know what you want to get out of the contest. Like, is it like, if it's a tiny contest, like, how many people know about this contest? Like, you know, if you're looking to get people aware of your work, but the contest is very small, and you're not reaching, you know, the audience you want to reach, then consider why you're doing it.
Other questions?
There are no dumb questions. There's one dumb question, which is, where do you keep your ice cubes? So if you're not asking that, you're good. So ask away.
Wait, but that could be like, what about in the hotel when you do the ice?
It's the freezer. I guess you're right. Like even that has other answers. But we know it's a freezer of some kind.
Is there anything that we haven't covered that you think would be important for writers to know or to understand?
I think we covered a lot. And like, if you come up with like, again, like if you can't think of a question right now, then you spot us out in the hall. We're pretty friendly, so we're not gonna be like, don't talk to me. Like, I'm happy to answer. Like, you know, as an agent, like we want you guys to know and be aware of what's going on. We want you to understand the industry and not like, it doesn't help us that you don't know. So we want you to be informed. So we're happy to answer any questions.
One more going back to contracts. Do you, all three of you, use the exact same contract? Or is it nuanced? Well, not individually. Do you always send the same contracts or?
No, agents do all have different agreements. Our agreement's actually 5 pages, and some people are like, what? Actually,
It's 7.
some agencies, like super revenue agencies, have 1 page. Like, that's it. So, you know, if you go to the AAR website, guys, like I said, if you're a member of the AAR, it means that you are reputable because this Committee of Ethics has deemed you reputable to join. But if you're not a member, it doesn't mean you aren't, because there are certain level of things that you have to reach before you're even a member. So if you go to the AAR website, they have their code of ethics right there on the site. I think anyone can see them. And that will actually give you a sense of like the stuff that all agents should be following. And that could be conveyed in a 1-page agreement or in a 7-page agreement, like it's fine. But that will give you a sense of what they should be following. But like, you know, agreements for agents will cover specifically what they are representing, you know, and it will cover the term for how long they're representing it. It will cover what their commissions are. It will cover if there's any expenses that are to be charged back to you and what those will be. What else do they always cover?
Termination, indemnity.
Yeah, reps and warranties, which is basically where they're saying we are stating that we are doing these things, and you are stating that you are doing these things. What's always covered in reps and warranties, by the way, is they'll say that you are giving us original work and have not stolen this work from somebody else, because we might not necessarily know that, so we cover that in there. Yeah, there's a lot of legalese surrounding that. So.
Yes.
I paraphrase or apologize if this question was asked. What about foreign clients? Like,
I'm sorry, I can't actually hear.
what about foreign clients, like taking on a Canadian client? Is that, or is it something that,
Sure, we represent clients all over the world, it's just different tax stuff.
Yeah, exactly.
And we expect those clients to like, we'll say, like, you need to actually figure out what foreign tax forms that you need to fill out. It's not our job to be experts in
We might
worldwide
be able to
accounting.
help just because of our experience working with other Canadian authors, and we're like, oh, we had another Canadian author who went to this embassy and was able to get so-and-so form. So we might be able to help guide, but it is, you know, in terms of tax things, we try to help, but it is still your taxes, so it's your responsibility.
Any additional questions?
Sorry, one more. If your agent, gets an offer from a publisher and you dislike it, and there's no other publishers in the what happens if the author and agent don't agree?
I don't dictate to my authors what to do. I give them my advice, and sometimes it means that I think you should walk away from this deal. It's up to them to agree or not. But yes, in the end, it's your decision. I don't sign anything for you. I don't sign anything on behalf of you. I don't accept deals without you approving it.
Yeah, I wouldn't recommend giving your agent power of attorney or anything like that. They can't sign for you, so, and no agent should really be asking for it.
That's probably a red flag.
I guess
It probably is a red flag.
Because power attorney means they could probably get involved in other business matters too.
I guess I was thinking more of the agent saying, well, that's it. There's
I
nothing
think
else.
it would really just depend on the scenario, because I mean, if it's a bad deal, I don't want you to take it. Like if you get an offer, but hopefully that won't happen, because I mean, if you're with a reputable agent, I send all of my clients my sub list and make sure that they're like cool with who it's going to. Because if there's an editor on there that they're like, I've had a bad experience with them at a conference, I don't want my work with them, and I'm not going to send it to them. So ideally that won't happen. If it does, then that's kind of something you have to approach when it happens. But if that happens, maybe you shouldn't be with that agent. They're sending it to somebody you don't like.
Yeah, they should. I mean, I've seen the turn down thing happen mostly with advanced levels for nonfiction and not fiction, right? Because advanced levels for fiction vary so much. I mean, they do for nonfiction too, but some people who are experts in a field might be like, I need 100K because in order to write this book, I actually need to go to this area and research there for 2 years. So that's the minimum level of advance that I could even accept to make this book happen. And then if we don't get it, sometimes we're like, it's not the right time, we might have to wait and put this one off. You know, that's more logistical, but it doesn't really happen often for fiction. It would have to be a very odd circumstance.
Yeah. And again, like, you know, when you're at that point, like I said, like it's better to be happy with the deal you're with than to just kind of settle and then regret later on. So do consider, I try to give my honest opinion, but in the end, when you make the decision, it's trust yourself and trust your agent. I hope you're trusting your agent to give you advice that you can believe in and go from there. But it will be a conversation. Yes.
Just earlier when you were talking about potential contests and whether they're reliable or not, and you guys mentioned signing away your rights potentially in a contest, what would that involve? Like giving rights in perpetuity for your book, or?
It's all in the small print, yeah. If you have to read it and see, some people are like, you're signing up for all rights in this work, like the copyright's owned by them.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
So just you just have to make sure it's very clear that you understand what it is you're signing.
Any other questions?
Anything about publishing? Could be a little bit beyond what we're
Yeah, it doesn't have to, like any of you guys ever missed.
So I feel like this isn't, and it's interesting because I've seen a lot of bloggers come out recently, like no one actually talks about real figures. And even if you subscribe to Publishers Marketplace, it does like the nice, good, great thing. You talked a little bit about, if you were in the industry before the crash, like how that's really changed. Are there any genres that you see more effective than other genres? And, are there any actual number ranges that you're comfortable sharing?
I think people don't share numbers because it varies so much. It's like you can't quote us on like saying that a book will get X amount of money because that might not be true. Like among my own clients who are, like depending on the book and everything, it's like so different. The time frame of them like getting the offers is really different too. So, it's that's probably why people can't really give a like concrete number.
It also really depends on genre too.
Yeah, exactly.
Because genre, because I specialize in primarily romance, we don't see a lot of money at the front end. We see it all in the back end for royalties. If YA, it's vastly different. I think you see compared to romance, you see pretty significantly higher advances from the bigger publishers compared to romance. That's where my comparison is coming from.
Yeah, like I could be saying that like a contemporary YA romance could be making about maybe like an offer is around like 10 to 15K, but then like what if it goes to auction and it can go higher? And just because something goes to auction doesn't mean it's going to hit 6 figures either. So there's a lot of very different variables, and so that's kind of like really difficult to guarantee.
Yeah, and I was agenting, I started just before the market crash, and I was like, so like fresh faced and like starry-eyed, and I was like, I'm gonna do this, and then it crashed like within that year, and I was like, oh god. So that was hard, but I actually I think that the immediate years after the crash, there was the biggest disparity, but we have since leveled off in terms of the advances. And in the immediate years after the crash, 2008, 2009, and a little bit 2010, what was happening is that the advances were just generally lower, and also they were buying a lot less. So it just was really, really tough time at that moment. But it really has since leveled off. The way publishers actually come up with their numbers, so you guys know how important competitive titles are, is they run profit and loss, like they run P&Ls before they make an offer to an agent or to an author. And the way that they come up with those numbers, especially if it's a debut, you're kind of like, well, what are they running these numbers based on? And it's based on comparison titles. And I will tell you is that there's 2 different types of comparison titles that you guys can come up with. There's like the comparison titles that are the ones that are more artistic and editorial, that are like more about mood and style and themes or whatever it be. And that's where you can pull in like a classic and say like, oh, this is like Pride and Prejudice meets, whatever it be, meets Dragon, right? So because that's great, that's like an editorial, but you're like not actually comparing your sales to Pride and Prejudice because that's bananas. So you have those kind of artistic and editorial comparison titles. And you as authors, I'm sure those are the first ones that come to mind for you. But then you need to actually market comparison titles. And those titles need to be recently published within the past 3 years, and they need to appeal very precisely to the same audience. So it doesn't need to be like similar themes necessarily, like you just need to know that the same audience is going to enjoy these. So like a good example, like at the time of Twilight is like, Twilight was huge, and right before it even became really big, the publishers, if you said my book is like Twilight, they were like, it's like I have a lot of books like Twilight. You should have been like, my books are like Claudia Gray and Lauren Kate, or something like that, to show it. These are the markets much more realistic. So take out the outliers. No Harry Potters, no Dan Browns, no E.L. James, no Twilights, no Hunger Games, no Origins. Like take out all the outliers. Don't use them. And then pick titles that have come out in the past 3 years that you know will appeal to the same audience. Because that's what publishers use when they run their P&Ls. And I will tell you right now, editors are so busy working on their books that they might not even be able, because they're the ones giving the titles to the sales team to run these P&Ls. They might not have a wide enough swatch, like outside their publishing house to use. So you actually can have a little bit of control of this. As agents, we also know this, so like we're also working on it, like whatever you use in content, I might be like, this one is better, or for different purposes. But there are some agents who also are so busy, like why not, like have it feed down. There have been sometimes pitches that were so strong that like I just tailored a little bit and been like, I'm using the author's pitch, I'm just tweaking it a bit. And then like the editor's like, this was so good, I'm gonna just tweak it a bit and put it on the back of the book. You've made everybody's job easier for them, but the best part about it is not about making their job easier, you control the message. You literally control how people see your work, and that can start with their P&L. So that's how they come up with their numbers. So if you're giving them titles that have low sales, it's kind of like they're gonna look at that and say, all right. I mean, they also might come up with titles that have low sales on their end and say, like, that book, they pull the numbers in the industry and they think, that book didn't sell that well, so we can't really offer this book a lot of money because we don't see a way to make more than the other books like it. And it's not just in the publishing house too, it's at the bookseller stage. Barnes & Noble does the same thing when they consider carrying you up. They're like, well, the last 4 books that we have are like, this does not sell very well, so we'll take 200 copies maybe. So it's like it's a trickle-down effect, and that's how advances are calculated. If that helps you to know, I know it doesn't give you an answer, because the answer is the advances can run from $0 all the way up to 7 figures. Like, that doesn't help.
Instead of you have public marketplace, you can then look at your 3.5 years and kind of like that message.
Yes, it's exactly right.
that was like excellently put, especially because I've been having some people ask me like, oh, when I use cocktails, can I just use movies? And that's a good reason why you want to use books, and why you want to use recent books. Like, you know, like Joanna said, like maybe you want one that's kind of like similar to yours editorially in tone and mood and writing style, and then you want to have one that's like maybe more comparative, like this person was also a new author writing in a paranormal romance, because mine is also a paranormal romance. So it will appeal to the same audience, even though it's not an exact same subject or theme that these two books